Welcome to Cozy Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups. This is a reading of stories from the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. If you enjoy these videos, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. The Frog Prince. Long ago, when wishes often came true, there lived a king whose daughters were all handsome, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun himself, who has seen everything, was bemused every time he shone over her because of her beauty. Near the royal castle, there was a great dark wood, and in the wood, under an old linden tree, was a well. And when the day was hot, the king's daughter used to go forth into the wood and sit by the brink of the cool well, and if the time seemed long, she would take out a golden ball and throw it up and catch it again, and this was her favorite pastime. Now it happened one day that the golden ball, instead of falling back into the maiden's little hand, which had sent it aloft, dropped to the ground near the edge of the well and rolled in. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes as it sank, but the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Then she began to weep, and she wept and wept, as if she could never be comforted. And in the midst of her weeping, she heard a voice saying to her, "What ails you, king's daughter? Your tears would melt a heart of stone." And when she looked to see where the voice came from, there was nothing but a frog stretching his thick, ugly head out of the water. "Oh, it is you, old waddler," said she. "I weep because my golden ball has fallen into the well." "Never mind, do not weep," answered the frog. "I can help you." "But what will you give me if I fetch up your ball again?" "Whatever you like, dear frog," said she. "Any of my clothes, my pearls and jewels, or even the golden crown that I wear." "Your clothes, your pearls and jewels, and your golden crown are not for me," answered the frog. "But if you would love me, and have me for your companion and playfellow, and let me sit by you at table, and eat from your plate, and drink from your cup, and sleep in your little bed, if you would promise all this, then I would dive below the water and fetch you your golden ball again." "Oh yes," she answered, "I will promise it all, whatever you want, if you will only get me my ball again." But she thought to herself, "What nonsense he talks, as if he could do anything but sit in the water and croak with the other frogs, or could possibly be anyone's companion." But the frog, as soon as he heard her promise, drew his head under the water and sank down out of sight. But after a while, he came to the surface again with the ball in his mouth, and he threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was overjoyed to see her pretty plaything again, and she caught it up and ran off with it. "Stop, stop," cried the frog. "Take me up too. I cannot run as fast as you." But it was of no use, for croak after her as he might, she would not listen to him, but made haste home, and very soon forgot all about the poor frog, who had to betake himself to his well again. The next day, when the king's daughter was sitting at table with the king and all the court, and eating from her golden plate, there came something pitter-patter up the marble stairs, and there came a knocking at the door, and a voice crying, "Youngest king's daughter, let me in." And she got up and ran to see who it could be. But when she opened the door, there was the frog sitting outside. Then she shut the door hastily and went back to her seat, feeling very uneasy. The king noticed how quickly her heart was beating and said, "My child, what are you afraid of? Is there a giant standing at the door ready to carry you away?" "Oh no," answered she, "no giant, but a horrid frog." "And what does the frog want?" asked the king. "Oh, dear father," answered she, "when I was sitting by the well yesterday and playing with my golden ball, it fell into the water, and while I was crying for the loss of it, the frog came and got it again, for me on condition I would let him be my companion. But I never thought he could leave the water and come after me. But now there he is outside the door, and he wants to come in to me." And then they all heard him knocking the second time and crying, "Youngest king's daughter, open to me by the well water what promised you me. Youngest king's daughter, now open to me. That which thou hast promised must thou perform," said the king, "so go now and let him in." So she went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in, following at her heels till she reached her chair. Then he stopped and cried, "Lift me up to sit by you." But she delayed doing so until the king ordered her. When once the frog was on the chair, he wanted to get on the table, and there he sat and said, "Now push your golden plate a little nearer, so that we may eat together." And so she did, but everybody might see how unwilling she was, and the frog feasted heartily, but every morsel seemed to stick in her throat. "I have had enough now," said the frog at last, "and as I am tired, you must carry me to your room, and make ready your silken bed, and we will lie down and go to sleep." Then the king's daughter began to weep, and was afraid of the cold frog, that nothing would satisfy him but he must sleep in her pretty clean bed. Now the king grew angry with her, saying, "That which thou hast promised in thy time of necessity must thou now perform." So she picked up the frog with her finger and thumb, carried him upstairs, and put him in a corner. And when she had lain down to sleep, he came creeping up, saying, "I am tired, and want sleep as much as you. Take me up, or I will tell your father." Then she felt beside herself with rage, and picking him up, she threw him with all her strength against the wall, crying, "Now will you be quiet, you horrid frog." But as he fell, he ceased to be a frog, and became all at once a prince with beautiful kind eyes. And it came to pass that with her father's consent they became bride and bridegroom. And he told her how a wicked witch had bound him by her spells, and how no one but she alone could have released him, and that they two would go together to his father's kingdom. And there came to the door a carriage drawn by 8 white horses, with white plumes on their heads, and with golden harness, and behind the carriage was standing faithful Henry, the servant of the young prince. Now, faithful Henry had suffered such care and pain when his master was turned into a frog, that he had been obliged to wear 3 iron bands over his heart to keep it from breaking with trouble and anxiety. When the carriage started to take the prince to his kingdom and faithful Henry had helped them both in, he got up behind and was full of joy at his master's deliverance. And when they had gone a part of the way, the prince heard a sound at the back of the carriage, as if something had broken. And he turned round and cried, "Henry, the wheel must be breaking." But Henry answered, "The wheel does not break, 'tis the band round my heart, that to listen its ache. When I grieved for your sake, I bound round my heart." Again, and yet once again, there was the same sound, and the prince thought it must be the wheel breaking, but it was the breaking of the other bands from faithful Henry's heart, because he was so relieved and happy. The Gallant Tailor. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting on his board near the window, and working cheerfully with all his might, when an old woman came down the street crying, "Good jelly to sell, good jelly to sell." The cry sounded pleasant in the little tailor's ears, so he put his head out of the window and called, "Here, my good woman, come here if you want a customer." So the poor woman climbed the steps with her heavy basket and was obliged to unpack and display all of her pots to the tailor. He looked at every one of them, and lifting all of the lids, applied his nose to each, and said at last, "The jelly seems pretty good. You may weigh me out 4½ ounces, or I don't mind having 1/4 pound." The woman, who had expected to find a good customer, gave him what he asked for, but went off angry and grumbling. "This jelly is the very thing for me," cried the little tailor. "It will give me strength and cunning." And he took down the bread from the cupboard, cut a whole round of the loaf, and spread the jelly on it, laid it near him, and went on stitching more gallantly than ever. All the while the scent of the sweet jelly was spreading throughout the room, where there were quantities of flies, who were attracted by it and flew to partake. "Now then, who asked you to come?" said the tailor, and drove the unbidden guests away. But the flies, not understanding his language, were not to be got rid of like that, and returned in larger numbers than before. Then the tailor, not being able to stand it any longer, took from his chimney corner a ragged cloth, and saying, "Now I'll let you have it," beat it among them unmercifully. When he ceased and counted the slain, he found 7 lying dead before him. "This is indeed somewhat," he said, wondering at his own gallantry. "The whole town shall know this." So he hastened to cut out a belt, and he stitched it, and put on it in large capitals, 7 at one blow. "The town, did I say?" said the little tailor. "The whole world shall know it," and his heart quivered with joy like a lamb's tail. The tailor fastened the belt round him, and began to think of going out into the world, for his workshop seemed too small for his worship. So he looked about in all the house for something that would be useful to take with him, but he found nothing but an old cheese, which he put in his pocket. Outside the door, he noticed that a bird had got caught in the bushes, so he took that and put it in his pocket with the cheese, and then he set out gallantly on his way. and as he was light and active, he felt no fatigue. The way led over a mountain, and when he reached the topmost peak, he saw a terrible giant sitting there and looking about him at his ease. The tailor went bravely up to him, calling out to him, and said, "Comrade, good day. There you sit, looking over the wide world. I am on the way thither to seek my fortune. Have you a fancy to go with me?" The giant looked at the tailor contemptuously and said, "You little rascal, you miserable fellow." "That may be," answered the little tailor, and undoing his coat, he showed the man his belt. "You can read there whether I am a man or not." The giant read 7 at one blow, and thinking it meant men that the tailor had killed, felt at once more respect for the little fellow. But as he wanted to prove him, he took up a stone and squeezed it so hard that the water came out of it. "Now you can do that," said the giant. "That is, if you have the strength for it." "That's not much," said the little tailor. "I call that play." And he put his hand in his pocket and took up the cheese and squeezed it so that the whey ran out of it. "Well," said he, "what do you think of that?" The giant did not know what to say to it, for he could not have believed it of the little man. Then the giant took up a stone and threw it so high that it was nearly out of sight. "Now, little fellow, suppose you do that." "Well thrown," said the tailor, "but the stone fell back to earth again. I will throw you one that will never come back." So he felt in his pocket, took out the bird and threw it into the air. And the bird, when it found itself at liberty, took wing, flew off, and returned no more. "What do you think of that, comrade?" asked the tailor. "There is no doubt that you can throw," said the giant, "but we will see if you can carry." He led the little tailor to a mighty oak tree which had been felled and was lying on the ground, and said, "Now if you are strong enough, help me to carry this tree out of the wood." "Willingly," answered the little man. "You take the trunk on your shoulders, I will take the branches with all their foliage. That is much the most difficult." So the giant took the trunk on his shoulders, and the tailor seated himself on a branch. And the giant, who could not see what he was doing, had the whole tree to carry, and the little man on it as well. And the little man was very cheerful and merry, and whistled the tune. And there were 3 tailors riding by, as if carrying the tree was mere child's play. The giant, when he had struggled on under his heavy load a part of the way, was tired out and cried, "Look here, I must let go of the tree." The tailor jumped off quickly, and taking hold of the tree with both arms, as if he were carrying it, said to the giant, "You see you can't carry the tree, though you are such a big fellow." They went on together a little farther, and presently they came to a cherry tree, and the giant took hold of the topmost branches, where the ripest fruit hung, and pulling them downwards, gave them to the tailor to hold, bidding him eat. But the little tailor was much too weak to hold the tree, and as the giant let go, the tree sprang back, and the tailor was caught up into the air. And when he dropped down again without any damage, the giant said to him, "How is this? Haven't you strength enough to hold such a weak sprig as that?" "It is not strength that is lacking," answered the little tailor. "How should it be to one who has slain 7 at one blow? I just jumped over the tree because the hunters are shooting down there in the bushes. You jump it too if you can." The giant made the attempt, and not being able to vault the tree, he he remained hanging in the branches, so that once more the little tailor got the better of him. Then said the giant, "As you are such a gallant fellow, suppose you come with me to our den and stay the night." The tailor was quite willing, and he followed him. When they reached the den, there sat some other giants by the fire, and each had a roasted sheep in his hand and was eating it. The little tailor looked round and thought, there was more elbow room here than in my workshop, and the giant showed him a bed, and told him he had better lie down upon it and go to sleep. The bed was, however, too big for the tailor, so he did not stay in it, but crept into a corner to sleep. As soon as it was midnight, the giant got up, took a great staff of iron, and beat the bed through with one stroke, and supposed he had made an end of that grasshopper of a tailor. Very early in the morning the giants went into the wood and forgot all about the little tailor. And when they saw him coming after them alive and merry, they were terribly frightened, and thinking he was going to kill them, they ran away in all haste. So the little tailor marched on, always following his nose, and after he had gone a great way, he entered the courtyard belonging to a king's palace, and there he felt so overpowered with fatigue that he lay down and fell asleep. In the meanwhile came various people who looked at him very curiously, and read on his belt 7 at one blow. "Oh," said they, "why should this great lord come here in time of peace? What a mighty champion he must be." Then they went and told the king about him, and they thought that if war should break out, what a worthy and useful man he would be, and that he ought not to be allowed to depart at any price. The king then summoned his council and sent one of his courtiers to the little tailor to beg him, as soon as he should wake up, to consent to serve in the king's army. So the messengers stood and waited at the sleeper's side until his limbs began to stretch and his eyes to open, and then he carried his answer back. And the answer was, "That was the reason for which I came. I am ready to enter the king's service." So he was received into it very honorably, and a separate dwelling set apart for him. But the rest of the soldiers were very much set against the little tailor, and they wished him 1,000 miles away. "What shall be done about it?" they said among themselves. "If we pick a quarrel and fight with him, then 7 of us will fall at each blow. That will be of no good to us." So they came to a resolution and went all together to the king to ask for their discharge. "We never intended," said they, "to serve with a man who kills 7 at a blow." The king felt sorry to lose all his faithful servants because of one man, and he wished that he had never seen him, and would willingly get rid of him if he might. But he did not dare to dismiss the little tailor for fear he should kill all the king's people and place himself upon the throne. He thought a long while about it, and at last made up his mind what to do. He sent for the little tailor and told him that as he was so great a warrior, he had a proposal to make to him. He told him that in a wood in his dominions dwelt 2 giants, who did great damage by robbery, murder, and fire, and that no man durst go near them for fear of his life, but that if the tailor should overcome and slay both these giants, the king would give him his only daughter in marriage, and half his kingdom as dowry, and that 100 horsemen should go with him to give him assistance. "That would be something for a man like me," thought the little tailor. beautiful princess and half a kingdom are not to be had every day. And he said to the king, "Oh yes, I can soon overcome the giants, and yet have no need of the 100 horsemen. He who can kill 7 at one blow has no need to be afraid of 2. So the little tailor set out, and the 100 horsemen followed him. When he came to the border of the wood, he said to his escort, "Stay here while I go to attack the giants." Then he sprang into the wood and looked about him right and left. After a while, he caught sight of the 2 giants. They were lying down under a tree asleep and snoring so that all the branches shook. The little tailor, all alive, filled both his pockets with stones and climbed up into the tree and made his way to an overhanging bough, so that he could seat himself just above the sleepers. And from there he let one stone after another fall on the chest of one of the giants. For a long time the giant was quite unaware of this, but at last he waked up and pushed his comrade and said, "What are you hitting me for?" "You are dreaming," said the other. "I am not touching you." And they composed themselves again to sleep, and the tailor let fall a stone on the other giant. "What can that be?" cried he. "What are you casting at me?" "I am casting nothing at you," answered the first, grumbling. They disputed about it for a while, but as they were tired, they gave it up at last, and their eyes closed once more. Then the little tailor began his game anew, picked out a heavier stone, and threw it down with force upon the first giant's chest. "This is too much," cried he, and sprang up like a madman and struck his companion such a blow that the tree shook above them. The other paid him back with ready coin, and they fought with such fury that they tore up trees by their roots to use for weapons against each other, so that at last they both of them lay dead upon the ground, and now the little tailor got down. "Another piece of luck," said he, "that the tree I was sitting in did not get torn up too, or else I should have had to jump like a squirrel from one tree to another." Then he drew his sword and gave each of the giants a few hacks in the breast, and went back to the horsemen and said, "The deed is done. I have made an end of both of them. But it went hard with me. In the struggle they rooted up trees to defend themselves, but it was of no use. They had to do with a man who can kill 7 at one blow." "Then are you not wounded?" asked the horseman. "Nothing of the sort," answered the tailor. "I have not turned a hair." The horsemen still would not believe it, and rode into the wood to see, and there they found the giants wallowing in their blood, and all about them lying the uprooted trees. The little tailor then claimed the promised boon, but the king repented him of his offer, and he sought again how to rid himself of the hero. "Before you can possess my daughter and the half of my kingdom," said he to the tailor, "you must perform another heroic act. In the wood lives a unicorn who does great damage. You must secure him." "A unicorn does not strike more terror into me than 2 giants. 7 at one blow, that is my way," was the tailor's answer. So, taking a rope and an axe with him, he went out into the wood and told those who were ordered to attend him to wait outside. He had not far to seek. The unicorn soon came out and sprang at him, as if he would make an end of him without delay. "Softly, softly," said he, "most haste, worst speed," and remained standing until the animal came quite near. Then he slipped quietly behind a tree. The unicorn ran with all his might against the tree and struck his horn so deep into the trunk that he could not get it out again, and so was taken. "Now I have you," said the tailor, coming out from behind the tree and putting a rope around the unicorn's neck. He took the axe, set free the horn, and when all his party were assembled, he led forth the animal and brought it to the king. The king did not yet wish to give him the promised reward, and set him a third task to do. Before the wedding could take place, the tailor was to secure a wild boar, which had done a great deal of damage in the wood. The huntsmen were to accompany him. "All right," said the tailor, "this is child's play." But he did not take the huntsmen into the wood, and they were all the better pleased, for the wild boar had many a time before received them in such a way that they had no fancy to disturb him. When the boar caught sight of the tailor, he ran at him with foaming mouth and gleaming tusks to bear him to the ground. But the nimble hero rushed into a chapel, which chanced to be near, and jumped quickly out of the window on the other side. The boar ran after him, and when he got inside, the door shut after him, and there he was imprisoned, for the creature was too big and unwieldy to jump out of the window too. Then the little tailor called the huntsmen, that they might see the prisoner with their own eyes, and then he betook himself to the king, who now, whether he liked it or not, was obliged to fulfill his promise and give him his daughter and the half of his kingdom. But if he had known that the great warrior was only a little tailor, he would have taken it still more to heart. So the wedding was celebrated with great splendor and little joy, and the tailor was made into a king. One night the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep and saying, "Now, boy, make me that waistcoat and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard measure about your shoulders." And so, as she perceived of what low birth her husband was, she went to her father the next morning and told him all, and begged him to set her free from a man who was nothing better than a tailor. The king bade her be comforted, saying, "Tonight, leave your bedroom door open, my guard shall stand outside, and when he is asleep they shall come in, and bind him and carry him off to a ship, and he shall be sent to the other side of the world." So the wife felt consoled, but the king's water-bearer, who had been listening all the while, went to the little tailor and disclosed to him the whole plan. "I shall put a stop to all of this," said he. At night he lay down as usual in bed, and when his wife thought that he was asleep, she got up, opened the door, and lay down again. The little tailor, who only made believe he was asleep, began to murmur plainly, "Now, boy, make me that waistcoat and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard measure about your shoulders. I have slain 7 at one blow, killed 2 giants, caught a unicorn, and taken a wild boar. And shall I be afraid of those who are standing outside my bedroom door?" And when they heard the tailor say this, a great fear seized them. They fled away as if they had been wild hares, and none of them would venture to attack him. And so the little tailor remained a king all of his lifetime. The Giant and the Tailor. A certain tailor, who was great at boasting but poor at doing, took it into his head to go abroad for a while and look about the world. As soon as he could manage it, he left his workshop and wandered on his way over hill and dale, sometimes hither, sometimes thither, but ever on and on. Once, when he was out, he perceived in the blue distance a steep hill, and behind it a tower reaching to the clouds, which rose up out of the wild, dark forest. "Thunder and lightning," cried the tailor. "What is that?" And as he was strongly goaded by curiosity, he went boldly towards it. But what made the tailor open his eyes and mouth when he came near it was to see that the tower had legs and leapt in one bound over the steep hill, and was now standing as an all-powerful giant before him. "What do you want here, you little fly's leg?" cried the giant, with a voice as if it were thundering on every side. The tailor whimpered, "I want just to look about and see if I can earn a bit of bread for myself in this forest." "If that is what you are after," said the giant, "you may have a place with me. If it must be, why not? What wages shall I receive?" "You shall hear what wages you shall have. Every year 365 days, and when it is leap year, one more into the bargain. Does that suit you?" "All right," replied the tailor, and thought in his own mind, "A man must cut his coat according to his cloth. I will try to get away as fast as I can." On this the giant said to him, "Go, little ragamuffin, and fetch me a jug of water." "Had I not better bring the well itself at once, and the spring too?" asked the boaster, and went with the pitcher to the water. "What? The well and the spring too?" growled the giant in his beard, for he was rather clownish and stupid, and began to be afraid. "That knave is not a fool. He has a wizard in his body. Be on your guard, old Hans. This is no serving man for you." When the tailor had brought the water, the giant bade him go into the forest and cut a couple of blocks of wood and bring them back. Why not the whole forest at once with one stroke? The whole forest, young and old, with all that is there, both rough and smooth? Asked the little tailor, and went to cut the wood. "What? The whole forest, young and old, with all that is there, both rough and smooth, and the well and its spring too," growled the credulous giant in his beard, and was still more terrified. "The knave can do much more than bake apples, and has a wizard in his body. Be on your guard, old Hans. This is no serving man for you." When the tailor had brought the wood, the giant commanded him to shoot 2 or 3 wild boars for supper. "Why not rather 1,000 at one shot, and bring them all here?" inquired the ostentatious tailor. "What?" cried the timid giant in great terror. "Let well alone tonight and lie down to rest." The giant was so terribly alarmed that he could not close an eye all night long for thinking what would be the best way to get rid of this accursed sorcerer of a servant. Time brings counsel. Next morning the giant and the tailor went to a marsh, round which stood a number of willow trees. "Then," said the giant, "hark you, tailor, seat yourself on one of the willow branches. I long of all things to see if you are big enough to bend it down." All at once the tailor was sitting on it, holding his breath, and making himself so heavy that the bough bent down. When, However, he was compelled to draw breath. It hurried him, for unfortunately, he had not put his goose in his pocket, so high into the air that he never was seen again. And this to the great delight of the giant. If the tailor had not fallen down again, he must still be hovering about in the air. The Little Farmer. There was a certain village where lived many rich farmers and only one poor one, whom they called the Little Farmer. He had not even a cow, and still less had he money to buy one, and he and his wife greatly wished for such a thing. One day he said to her, "Listen, I have a good idea. It is that your godfather, the joiner, shall make us a calf of wood and paint it brown so as to look just like any other, and then in time perhaps it will grow big and become a cow." This notion pleased the wife, and godfather joiner set to work to saw and plane, and soon turned out a calf complete, with its head down and neck stretched out as if it were grazing. The next morning, as the cows were driven to pasture, the Little Farmer called out to the drover, "Look here, I have got a little calf to go, but it is still young and must be carried." "All right," said the drover, and tucked it under his arm, carried it into the meadows, and stood it in the grass, so the calf stayed where it was put, and seemed to be eating all the time, and the drover thought to himself, "It will soon be able to run alone, if it grazes at that rate." In the evening, when the herds had to be driven home, he said to the calf, "If you can stand there eating like that, you can just walk off on your own 4 legs. I am not going to lug you under my arm again." But the Little Farmer was standing by his house door and waiting for his calf, and when he saw the cowherd coming through the village without it, he asked what it meant. The cowherd answered, "It is still out there eating away, and never attended to the call, and would not come with the rest." Then the Little Farmer said, "I will tell you what, I must have my beast brought home." And they went together through the fields in quest of it. But someone had stolen it, and it was gone. And the drover said, "Mostly likely it has run away." But the Little Farmer said, "Not it," and brought the cowherd before the bailiff, who ordered him, for his carelessness, to give the Little Farmer a cow for the missing calf. So now the Little Farmer and his wife possessed their long-wished-for cow. They rejoiced with all their hearts, but unfortunately they had no fodder for it, and could give it nothing to eat, so that before long they had to kill it. Its flesh they salted down, and the Little Farmer went to the town to sell the skin and buy a new calf, with what he got for it. On the way he came to a mill where a raven was sitting with broken wings, and he took it up out of pity and wrapped it in the skin. The weather was very stormy, and it blew and rained, so he turned into the mill and asked for shelter. The miller's wife was alone in the house, and she said to the Little Farmer, "Well, come in and lie down in the straw." And she gave him a piece of bread and cheese, so the Little Farmer ate, and then laid down with his skin near him. And the miller's wife thought he was sleeping with fatigue. After a while in came another man, and the miller's wife received him very well, saying, "My husband is out." After a while in came another man, and the miller's wife received him very well, saying, "My husband is out, we will make good cheer." The Little Farmer listened to what they said, And when he heard good cheer spoken of, he grew angry to think he had been put off with bread and cheese. For the miller's wife presently brought out roast meat, salad, cakes, and wine. Now as the pair were sitting down to their feast, there came a knock at the door. "Oh dear," cried the woman, "it is my husband." In a twinkling she popped the roast meat into the oven, the wine under the pillow, the salad in the bed, the cakes under the bed, and the man in the linen closet. Then she opened the door to her husband, saying, "Thank goodness you are here. What weather it is, as if the world were coming to an end." When the miller saw the little farmer lying in the straw, he said, "What fellow have you got there?" "Oh," said the wife, "the poor chap came in the midst of the wind and rain and asked for shelter, and I gave him some bread and cheese and spread some straw for him." The husband answered, "Oh, well, I have no objection. Only get me something to eat at once." But the wife said, "There is nothing but bread and cheese." "Anything will do for me," answered the miller. "Bread and cheese forever." And catching sight of the little farmer, he cried, "Come along and keep me company." The little farmer did not wait to be asked twice, but sat down and ate. After a while, the miller noticed the skin lying on the ground, with the raven wrapped up in it, and he said, "What have you got there?" The little farmer answered, "A fortune teller." And the miller asked, "Can he tell my fortune?" "Why not?" answered the little farmer. "He will tell 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself." Now the miller became very curious and said, "Ask him to say something." And the little farmer pinched the raven so that it croaked. "Sir, sir." "What does he say?" asked the miller. And the little farmer answered, "First he says that there is wine under the pillow." "That would be jolly," cried the miller, and he went to look and found the wine, and then asked, "What next?" So the little farmer made the raven croak again, and then said, "He says, secondly, that there is a roast meat in the oven." "That would be jolly," cried the miller, and he went and looked and found the roast meat. The little farmer made the fortune teller speak again, and then he says, thirdly, that there is a salad in the bed." "That would be jolly," cried the miller, and went and looked and found the salad. Once more the little farmer pinched the raven, so that he croaked and said, "He says fourthly and lastly, that there are cakes under the bed." "That would be jolly," cried the miller, and he went and looked and found the cakes. And now the two sat down to table, and the miller's wife felt very uncomfortable. And she went to bed and took all the keys with her. The miller was eager to know what the 5th thing could be, but the little farmer said, "Suppose we eat the 4 things in peace first, for the 5th thing is a great deal worse." So they sat and ate, and while they ate they bargained together as to how much the miller would give for knowing the 5th thing. And at last they agreed upon $300. Then the little farmer pinched the raven so that he croaked, and the miller asked what he said, and the little farmer answered, "He says that there is a demon in the linen closet." "Then," said the miller, "that demon must come out of the linen closet." And he unbarred the house door, but the little farmer got the key of the linen closet from the miller's wife and opened it. Then the man rushed forth and out of the house, and the miller said, "I saw the black rogue with my own eyes, so that is a good riddance." And the little farmer took himself off by daybreak next morning with $300. And after this, the little farmer by degrees got on in the world, and built himself a good house. And the other farmers said, "Surely the little farmer has been where it rains gold pieces, and has brought home money by the bushel." And he was summoned before the bailiff to say whence his riches came. and all he said was, "I sold my calf's skin for $300. When the other farmers heard this, they wished to share such good luck and ran home, killed all their cows, skinned them in order to sell them also for the same high price as the little farmer." And the bailiff said, "I must be beforehand with them." So he sent his servant into the town to the skin buyer, and he only gave her $3 for the skin. And that was faring better than the others, for when they came, they did not get as much as that. For the skin buyer said, "What am I to do with all these skins?" Now the other farmers were very angry with the little farmer for misleading them, and they vowed vengeance against him, and went to complain of his deceit to the bailiff. The poor little farmer was with one voice sentenced to death, and to be put into a cask with holes in it and rolled into the water. So he was led to execution, and a priest was fetched to say a mass for him, and the rest of the people had to stand at a distance. As soon as the little farmer caught sight of the priest, he knew him for the man who was hidden in the linen closet at the miller's. And he said to him, "As I let you out of the cupboard, you must let me out of the cask." At that moment, a shepherd passed with a flock of sheep, and the little farmer, knowing him to have a great wish to become bailiff himself, called out with all his might, "No, I will not, and if all the world asked me, I would not." The shepherd, hearing him, came up and asked what it was he would not do. The little farmer answered, "They want to make me bailiff if I sit in this cask, but I will not do it." The shepherd said, "If that is all there is to do in order to become bailiff, I will sit in the cask and welcome." And the little farmer answered, "Yes, that is all. You just get into the cask, and you will become bailiff." So the shepherd agreed and got in, and the little farmer fastened on the top. Then he collected the herd of sheep and drove them away. The priest went back to the parish assembly and told them the mass had been said. Then they came and began to roll the cask into the water. As it went, the shepherd inside called out, "I consent to be bailiff." They thought that it was the little farmer who spoke, and they answered, "All right, but first you must go down below and look about you a little." And they rolled the cask into the water. Upon that the farmers went home, and when they reached the village, there they met the little farmer driving a flock of sheep, and looking quite calm and contented. The farmers were astonished and cried, "Little farmer, whence come you? How did you get out of the water?" "Oh, easily," answered he. "I sank and sank until I came to the bottom. Then I broke through the cask and came out of it, and there were beautiful meadows and plenty of sheep feeding. So I brought away this flock with me." "Then," said the farmers, "are there any left?" "Oh, yes," answered the little farmer, "more than you can possibly need." Then the farmers agreed that they would go and fetch some sheep, also each man a flock for himself. And the bailiff said, "Me first." And they all went together, and in the blue sky there were little fleecy clouds like lambskins, and they were reflected in the water, and the farmers cried out, "There are the sheep down here at the bottom." When the bailiff heard that, he pressed forward and said, "I will go first and look about me, and if things look well, I will call to you." And he jumped plump into the water, and they all thought that the noise he made meant come. So the whole company jumped in one after the other. So perished all of the proprietors of the village, and the little farmer, as sole heir, became a rich man. key. In the winter-time, when deep snow lay on the ground, a poor boy was forced to go out on a sledge to fetch wood. When he had gathered it together and packed it, he wished, as he was so frozen with cold, not to go home at once, but to light a fire and warm himself a little. So he scraped away the snow, and as he was thus clearing the ground, he found a tiny gold key. Hereupon he thought that where the key was, the lock must also be, and dug in the ground and found an iron chest. If the key does but fit it, thought he, no doubt there are precious things in that little box. He searched, but no keyhole was there. At last he discovered one, but so small that it was hardly visible. He tried it, and the key fitted it exactly. Then he turned it once round, and now we must wait until he has quite unlocked it and opened the lid, and then we shall learn what wonderful things were lying in that box. The Nail. A merchant had done good business at the fair. He had sold his wares and lined his money bags with gold and silver. Then he wanted to travel homewards and be in his own house before nightfall, so he packed his trunk with the money on his horse and rode away. At noon he rested in a town, and when he wanted to go farther, the stable boy brought out his horse and said, "A nail is wanting, sir, in the shoe of its left hind foot. Let it be wanting," answered the merchant. "The shoe will certainly stay on for 6 miles. I have still to go. I am in a hurry." In the afternoon, when he once more alighted and had his horse fed, the stable boy went into the room to him and said, "Sir, a shoe is missing from your horse's left hind foot. Shall I take him to the blacksmith?" "Let it still be wanting," answered the man. "The horse can very well hold out for the couple of miles which remain. I am in haste." He rode forth, but before long the horse began to limp. It had not limped long before it began to stumble. It had not stumbled long before it fell down and broke its leg. The merchant was forced to leave the horse where it was and unbuckle the trunk, take it on his back and go home on foot. And there he did not arrive until quite late at night. "And that unlucky nail," he said to himself, "has caused all this disaster. Make haste slowly."